This is the Anthropology Podcast, hosted by me, Gabby LaPera. Every 2 weeks, I interview a biological anthropologist about what makes us, us. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Anthrobiology Podcast. This is Gabby LaPera, joined by Dr. Danny Wescott at Texas State San Marcos. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing great.
I am so happy that you have decided to join the show. You are the first person that we are going to talk to about what is colloquially known as a body farm. And I'm super excited because I think this is something that a lot of people in their undergraduate anthropology classes hear about. And they're like, this is crazy. I can't believe people do this. And I don't know. I think it's just a really exciting way to get people into science. So thank you so much for joining us.
Sure. Glad to do it.
Can you, I'm trying to think. I guess let's start with the body farm. No, you know what? Let's start with you. Because I actually, while you work in forensics now, in forensic anthropology now, I don't think that that's where you started. If I recall correctly, you started doing like paleo stuff and like Native American research when you first entered anthropology. Is that right?
Yeah, my dissertation work is looking at biomechanical differences within the Great Plains and adjacent regions. And so I was looking at, the effects of, bison hunting and terrain differences on variation within the skeleton. And so that's where I focused at mostly. Of course, I was at the University of Tennessee, which, had a lot of forensic stuff. But I started out in kind of a bioarchaeology.
And then how did you make the kind of turn into forensics?
In some ways, it's because of the fact that I got my degree at the University of Tennessee. And so one of the things that anytime you go for a job interview or anything like that, they were like, oh, you're a forensic person. You were at Tennessee. And so kind of led that away. And then, there's other advantages of having that we could talk about later, but having documented skeletal collections that you actually know what the people were doing and stuff like that, that kind of went more with what my research interests are, in understanding human variation. And then, of course, you also had issues associated with, Native American remains. And so even like most of the ones that I, studied, I'm sure are not available for research anymore at all.
Yeah. Times are very, very different. I was looking, I think that the first article that I could find for you was something like 1997. And
about right.
Yeah. And like times have changed. Times have changed significantly. Like NAGPRA came out, Native Americans Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, for people who are somehow new to this podcast. That came out in 1996. So like it's like been a whole sea change in anthropology when it comes to Native remains. But if like your interest is variation, then like what you're doing now makes so much sense.
Right. Sure. Yeah. I mean, it allows me, one of the things that you'll find is that there's limitations to every sample that you have. And there are, questions that you can't address, I mean, when you're working with donated collections, for example, I mean, you're typically working with older individuals. And so you have to take that into consideration. You're not, where if you're looking at an archaeological sample, you're tending to get, if anything, actually a lot more younger individuals, in your sample. So there are pluses and minuses to both of them, but it's nice to be able to work with a sample that, people that knew what was going to be done with them and were happy that that's what's going to be.
Yeah. It's always way better to be with people who want to be there.
Yes.
Want to be there. And anyway, so you work at Texas State San Marcos, which I've actually been to. It is very beautiful out there. If you like rocky rolling hills, then you would like San Marcos. If you're not into that, then you probably won't like it very much. There's plenty of wildlife. You're not too far from the city, which is cool. But besides sounding like a tourism ad for San Marcos, which I've apparently devolved into, can you tell me a little bit about kind of the center, like how it's structured at the university? So I know that there's FACS, which is the Forensic Anthropology Center at Texas State. And then like kind of subsumed under that, you have a few different programs.
Yeah. So FACS, which is the Forensic Anthropology Center at Texas State, is a center within the Department of Anthropology. So it's not like a university center. It's actually a center within the department. But within FACS, we kind of have some different aspects. But the main thing that's driving this is that we have a willed body donation program. And then from there, we have basically three major laboratories that you can kind of look at it that way. And one is the outdoor decomposition facility or taphonomy facility. And then the other is our processing lab, where, once the bodies come in, they're processed down to a skeleton and all that in that lab. And then we have in what's called the Grady Early building, we have our skeletal lab. And so that's where we do analyses of the skeletal remains associated with the donors.
So there is an article that I think came out in 2021, I want to say, that's called The Texas State Donated Skeletal Collection at the Forensic Anthropology Center at Texas State, which very straightforward. It is exactly what it sounds like it's about. So if anyone wants to like know more about all of these things and like in minute detail, I would definitely recommend this article. One of the things that stood out to me is that you've had over the course of this whole project, there have been 710 donors, which is crazy. How long has the facility been open?
We've been open since 2008. And I would imagine that we're probably, I don't know the latest, but I think we're probably close to 850. So we typically, depending on the research going on, we typically get between 60 to 80 individuals a year.
And do all of the individuals who donated their body, do they all go to the outdoor research center, or do they go to like different places?
Pretty much everybody's going to go.
And then once you're done with the bodies, with the cadavers, do you, it's my understanding that you then keep the skeletons and you add them to the Texas State skeletal collection, which is really cool.
Yeah. So, one of the things that's different about donating your body to some place, like Texas State University, is that we do a lot of research. It's not, we dissect it one semester and then they're done. We do some kind of, taphonomic research of some sort.
Oh, and can you define what taphonomy is, please?
Taphonomy is anything that happens to a once living organism from the moment it dies until it's discovered. And so it kind of goes back to, the paleontology, where it's from the biosphere to the lithosphere. So looking at fossilization process. And we're really just looking at the early process of it, right? Although not everything we do is associated with forensics. So we also are very interested in like trying to reconstruct burial practices and archaeological sites and things of that nature as well. But where was I going with this?
The bodies, they're not just dissected and
so
returned.
They're not just So once they're done with that, then we collect the bodies and then we bring them in and we have them processed. Good thing we're not. So, and this allows, especially our undergraduates, to get a lot of exposure to a lot of human variation. They get to see, a lot of disease processes of the bone that they wouldn't see. They get to see, variation in size and shapes and everything else. And then once the bodies are processed, then they're brought into this lab where they are used for skeletal research. One thing I skipped in there was that after they're done with research at the facility, they are typically also then used in some kind of a training. So we do lots of training for law enforcement, medical, legal investigators. And so in those cases, they may, if it's a buried body, for example, will use it to train people how to excavate remains. If it's a surface, we'll do surface scattered remains or something of that nature. One of the things about probably most of the facilities is that they're probably more valuable for the training experience than anything else.
have so many questions now. I guess my first question is about the trainings, which is, is there like any measurable difference in responders' like abilities to find stuff after trainings? Like, are people like, is the San Marcos Police Department like the best equipped police department when it comes to forensic remains? Or
well, to be perfectly honest with you, most of what the training does makes them aware of the value of having an anthropologist on the scene. And so they're much more likely to call an anthropologist than they would have in the past. They also realize it's a lot of hard work, and most of them don't want to do the hard work. So they're also willing to bring in a bunch of 20-year-old students and do the work. But yes, in some ways that it is true. I mean, so one of the things that, for example, we've done some research on finding clandestine remains using remote sensing, so especially using drones. And I would say that the San Antonio Police Department comes up and does training up here, and they also will, like, if they're missing somebody, they will actually come and fly over individuals that but been dead about the same amount of time and things of that nature. And so they're probably a lot better at finding people than just the average police department.
Yeah, and so this is one of the points of having the research facility, is that you are creating data that people can use like today, and then additionally, like, people are like, one of the things that someone said to me once is, isn't one body farm enough? And I said, no, absolutely not. Will you tell that person why?
Well, yeah, there's actually a lot of reasons that is true. But, if you're looking at just decomposition, the decomposition rates obviously vary a lot depending on the local weather. Even the pattern can, to some extent, depending on whether you have like lots of rain or something. For example, in Texas, we have where the bodies will, decomposition is a drying process, and so they'll start to desiccate. But then if which will slow down decomposition a lot, right? You never stop decomposition, but you slow it down a lot. But if you get a good rain, it can regenerate stuff and change the rate again. So there's all kinds of things of that nature. There's also, like I said, because of the fact that it's a training facility, you want to have training facilities all across the country that will help. And then, there's also, the ability to do a lot of collaboration and look at, what's going on at your facility versus our facility. How does it affect, the vegetation? You have different vegetation, you have different scavengers. So there's all kinds of things of that nature. I mean, there's the one in northern Michigan, for example, something like 127 inches of snow a year. So from October to June, they can't even see a ball. Where in Texas, right now, we're trying to put some out for a winter experiment. The problem is that it's 70 degrees outside.
Yeah. Actually, I have a question about scavengers. I know the facility is fenced. I can't imagine there's a body farm out there that's not fenced, but I know the facility is fenced. Are there more scavengers there than there are in other parts of the hills surrounding San Marcos? Like, is that a problem for you?
No, not really. So it's kind of interesting because, I mean, we do get coyotes and other scavengers, large mammalian scavengers that come in, but really not more than what you would expect. I know that that's not always true. I think, for example, the University of Tennessee probably had a lot more raccoons in their facility than the general area, but that's not necessarily true for us. So one of the things that's interesting is that our main scavenger is vultures, and we actually had a PhD student when she was at LSU getting her PhD, Lauren Farr, who did a lot of research on the behavior of vultures. And so she even, caught vultures and put little GPS backpacks on them so she could follow them around and everything else. And it actually turned out that they come to our facility less than they come to the surrounding ranch.
Huh.
And part of that is because they're kind of a timid bird. It takes them a lot of effort to fly off, and so they don't like to be around when there's a lot of people. So, in that sense, we have probably less vultures than normal.
That's really interesting. And also, listeners, vultures are super, super interesting animals, and we weirdly don't know that much about them. Like, we know things about them, but we don't know as much as we do about many other birds, despite how prolific vultures are. So if anyone's like, I really want to research Project Vultures, would be a really cool one. No, that's really interesting. So there's obviously like environmental things, like climate things that can be different. Then there's also animals that can be different. Do you have like any kind of like scenario that you think you see more often in Texas than you would say in like a Michigan or Tennessee that you're like trying to understand?
Well, I don't know. Can you elaborate a little bit on it?
Yeah. Like, is there like a certain type of death that you see more often in Texas that you're like, oh, we need to, I don't know, we find way more bodies in cars here than we do in other places. So like we test different scenarios around that more often, or like we find people who are out in like the wilderness more often. So does that make sense?
Yes. Okay. So in Texas, especially where we're at, is that there's not much topsoil. There's a lot of rock. So a lot of the bodies that we find, in our forensic case, are surface remains. Even, throughout my career being in different places, what I've experienced is that usually if you have a buried body, it's either really shallow burial or it's a really deep burial. And there's not anything in between. And the reason for that is they're either trying to dig it by hand or they have a big machine that they can dig with, right? So in Texas, you get a lot of surface remains. And then also, the other thing too is that, especially here at Texas State with Operation Identification Project that Kate Bradley directs, you get a lot of border crossers deaths and presumed border crosser deaths. And those are all going to be on the surface because they're people who, went underneath a tree or something like that and died. So we get a lot of surface ones. The other thing that we get a lot of, as far as forensic cases go, are burn attempts, where, and then part of that, I think, there again, is because it's more difficult to bury a body. So, you build a fire in the backyard and burn your victim.
This is, I feel like, a super common misconception. People don't really understand how hot it needs to be and for how long for you to like successfully destroy a body to the point where people are probably not going to notice it anymore.
Right.
Like
it's almost impossible.
Yeah. Sorry. The reason I'm laughing is because it's one of those things where like you see it happen over and over again. And you're just like, it's just weird to me that no one has checked the internet and been like, this isn't a great way to dispose of the body. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. But, you got to put yourself in their position. That is, if you just kill somebody, you're not necessarily probably thinking straight. And the people who do, we don't catch.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there's always that bias, like you're catching the people who are the worst at this in general. Speaking of, do reporters, because I see that you do like a fair amount of media, do reporters ever ask you like, what's the best way to get rid of a body? Do they ask you that?
Reporters never do, but I do get questions I get a lot of inquiries from mystery writers. As a matter of fact, I even give a talk every year to a group in Austin of I think it's called Sisters in Crime or something like that. They meet every week, I think, or every month or something. But I come about once a year and talk about forensic anthropology and, stuff like that. And then they will a lot of times ask me, how would you get rid of a body?
You're like, I'm keeping that in my back pocket.
Well, so my thing is that, for me, the way to get rid of it is just put it out the facility. In plain sight of everybody, right?
Maybe no one will notice this highly regulated facility. um, no, this is really cool. I will say one of the things I really encourage people to look at your ResearchGate or your Google Scholar profile. You are an incredibly prolific writer. You are on so many articles and they are on so many different topics. Like last night, I was like, I'm going to see if I'm going to read through some articles and see if there's like a theme. There's a theme. There's forensics, but it's like I saw something on isotopes. I saw something else on the microstructure of bones. I saw another one on animal predation. Like it's just everywhere. It's crazy and it's delightful.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you're particularly interested in right now?
So when I was an assistant professor, that was the complaint that I got, was that I wasn't focused. Although I think I am focused. I'm just so. First of all, so actually, and I've even done, if you look at the publications recently, I've even done like Homo erectus body mass and stuff like that. So I do have a huge variety of things that I'm interested in. They all kind of have two aspects. One is that they are address some bigger question in anthropology. And then the second is that they have some applied application in forensics, typically. So right now I have about 4 main projects going on. So one of them is looking at, using remote imaging to find clandestine remains. And so I typically work with engineers and agricultural people and stuff like that. And then I have a project where it's a kind of an international project where I'm working with people from the UK and Netherlands and Italy and Canada, United States on a mass grave project, looking at the methods that are used to excavate mass graves and analyze the remains within those. And then I also have a new grant that's funding research looking at fire death investigation and trying to get individuals, the fire department and the fire investigators and the medical legal investigators to kind of work together and collect data that might be the same. And then on top of that, we're looking at things like, obesity. Does that affect the rate of burning? Because there's some people argue that fat acts as a fuel, some it acts as an insulation, right? So we're looking at those kind of things. And then probably my real interest is the one we're looking at the microstructure of bone associated with obesity. And part of the reason for obesity is that it's kind of a natural experiment in some ways, because we have lots of information about the differences in gait pattern between obese and non-obese individuals. And we can ask information from the donors about, their weight histories and things of that nature. And so it gives us a way of making some predictions about what we should see with bone microstructure. And then when we don't see what we predict, trying to figure out why. And that's my probably real interest, is understanding how does bone respond to mechanical forces. And, obesity is interesting in the fact that, typically bone is responding to mechanical forces associated with loading, especially by the muscles, and not so much by, excess fat mass. But it does play a role.
Yeah. 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 The like degree and amount of, the degree of force would be different potentially. So one thing that you mentioned is that one of the really cool things about having this like willed body donation program is that so much about the individuals that you're studying. It's not like other skeletal collections where you're like, this person died in poverty and now we just have their body and we don't really know that much about them other than what the bones tell us. Like you have an entire medical history for people, which is incredibly valuable.
Right. It is. I mean, in reality, a lot of these individuals I've even met, right? So, they come in here and fill out the paperwork and stuff like that. And then we also, because of the fact that we have this, we also sometimes have family members that come in to visit the body, and you can actually follow up and ask additional questions. It is still surprising sometimes that you get information that people just forget about themselves. We have a skeleton, for example, of a donor who has a just massive blunt force trauma to the head and to the ribs and things like that. And there's not a word about it in his records.
Like, is it like old and healed?
Yeah, yeah. So it's like something they've had for a long time. We also have another donor that has, when we started doing the process, has bird shot from a shotgun embedded in the tibia. There's not a word about being shot.
It's so, I was talking to my coworker the other day. She just turned 30, 32, I think. And she said, someone asked me how old I am, and I had to do math to figure it out. And I was like, that's not gonna happen less as you get older.
That's true.
And it's like, I can totally see stuff like that happening. Like I had a pretty good fall off of a horse a few months ago. And I went into PT, and the doctor was like, anything else that I should know about? And I was like, no. And then he started to work on me, and I was like, actually, I forgot. I have had surgery.
Yeah. And so that's the thing is that, and then 40, 50 years from now, you're definitely not going to remember to write it down on a question.
No. In terms of the type of people you get, you mentioned earlier that you mostly get older people, which is not that surprising because it's like people who have had end of life planning and they've thought about where they want their bodies to go. And they're like, this is where I want them to go. I guess, are there limitations to your sample group that you should be aware, that people should be aware about? Are there kind of like things that you see more often or less often with the type of people who donate?
Yeah, it kind of depends on, what you're trying to research. So, unless you're doing, if you're doing age estimation, unless you're doing older individuals, it's just not a good collection. I mean, we have some 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s, but, it's not going to be an overwhelming amount of individuals like that. Our average donor is about 67 years of age. Our average donor is white and male. So, that is going to be biased in that sense. But there's also different ways of looking at a collection. And one way is that there's also advantages to having a whole bunch of 67-year-old white males in the fact that you just controlled for a lot of variation, depending on what you're looking at, right? So, you have those obvious things. And then you're also going to have some groups that are not going to donate their bodies. And same thing with, children. We typically are not going to, we do get fetal remains in infants sometimes, but typically, luckily we live in a society where children don't die that often. And when they do, their parents are not likely to donate them. And even if they do donate them, they typically are going to want for the study to be done on the disease that killed them. And we get that occasionally, and we have to, but part of being, having an ethically sourced collection is that you are, you are transparent with the families and stuff. And so we have to tell them, this, for example, is not a disease that we would research. It might be interesting to see how it affects the skeleton, but it's not something we would research. And so if that's what your goal is, then maybe we can help you find a different place to donate.
So do people, if they donate, do they have to do like the whole thing? Can they, like, for example, if someone was like, I really want to donate my body to an anatomy program, but like y'all get my bones when they're done, is that something they could do? Or is it like they have to do they have to go in and do the research facility and then they end up in the skeletal collection?
They pretty much have to go through the whole process. One is that we don't have any embalmed bodies or anything of that. I guess it's possible. We do have more. What we have are people that, donate organs, sometimes even donate bone, and we will, still take their bodies for that. So I guess it's possible, but it'd be a pretty rare thing. And then the other thing too is that we are really upfront about the fact that we do not return the remains. And so we always tell the families, if you're interested in having the body back, then we're not the program for you.
Yeah, as part of my my fall earlier this year, it reminded me of my own mortality, and like something I've said for a really long time is I want to donate my body to an anatomical program and then find a collection where I can donate my skeleton when they're done dissecting me. Like reading through all of the paperwork that you have on your site, I'm like, this is actually a much more complicated process. Like, it's not something that you can just say, I want this to happen, and then it happens. Like, you need to go and find the programs that you want to donate your body to. And then on top of that, you help people if they die within a 100-mile radius of the facility, you'll go pick them up. But if I were to die in California and I wanted to donate my body to you, I would have to figure out, someone, I guess, alive would have to figure out how to get my body to you.
Right. But most of the time in that case, what they do is actually just fly the body in as freight to the Austin airport. We have people do that all the time. And typically they make those arrangements ahead of time, so it's not that difficult.
If you know it's coming, it's not that difficult.
It's not, if you know it's coming.
Also, side note, I saw a really interesting study that you were involved in that looked at whether the freezing process substantially changed the microbiome on cadavers, on human cadavers. And it turns out that it doesn't, which I thought was really interesting. And again, a great application of your research in real life. Like, it's just so cool. I feel like you have so many different interests, which I love. That's probably why I didn't make it in anthropology, because I'm too interested in too many different things. I could not for the life of me imagine doing like one research project for the rest of my life. But two, like, I feel like you take every single thing that you have available to you and you like squeeze the juice out of it, and you're like, I'm going to learn everything I possibly can from all of the things around me, which is so neat. It's so exciting to talk to someone like that.
Well, so that's there are different people have different expertise, and there are I work with a colleague who can write code to do anything. I don't know how to write code at all. Typically, what I would say what I'm good at is coming up with research. Most of the time, I have no idea how to answer them myself, but I'm good at finding people that can do. And so that's the reason I work with lots of different people, in different disciplines. And so I do have a lot of interests. And then a lot of these, come up with, like looking at freezing, is that some of these are just practical things. Like, okay, if we're going to lay out 20 bodies at one time, there's no way we can not freeze some of them, right? So is it even worth doing the study if the freezing is going to interfere with it, right? Because one of the things with decomposition that I think as time goes on we'll find is that the rate and the pattern in which you decompose is largely based on the microbiome you have when you died.
Huh.
Now, I mean, obviously, where you are buried and all that kind of stuff, is going to have an effect. But, we know that your microbiome is what attracts flies. For example, the bacteria actually, send out little signals to the flies. The flies then, lay down peptides that help those bacteria, all that kind of stuff. And so I think that's going to be a big driving force. And so if we want to know, microbiology to understand like the postmortem interval or estimate the postmortem interval, we also then have to know things like, is it going to get screwed up if we freeze them? Is it going to get screwed up if we, have use an autopsy body versus a non-autopsy? All those kind of things. And so a lot of them have really good practicality, but they're really just, answering questions that need to be answered before you can actually delve into the research.
That's so cool. I love it. I was actually wondering, we are like ships passing in the night. I don't know if you remember, but I actually came to visit you like 10-ish years ago at Texas State when I was trying to decide on a grad school. And I ended up going to Nebraska because they paid for everything, and I would have had debt if I'd went to Texas State, unfortunately. But I don't know if you know this, but I remember you very distinctly, and I was like, he's great. I wish he could have been my advisor.
Well, good. I mean, I thought that if you actually came here, but
I am very pleased that I get to talk to you because you are exactly as I remember you. And I was wondering, do you still take on grad students? Like, is that something because that was a really big part of what you were doing 10 years ago when I came to visit?
Yeah, I currently have 4 PhD students and 9 master students. And then I'll accept more for the upcoming year.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
it's it's an important part of it. And the thing is that, especially being in forensic anthropology, a lot of my students don't go into like academia, or they go on to, get jobs in medical examiners' offices or crime labs or, a lot of different things. But so it's not kind of the traditional academic route always, but I do think it's important to train the next generation of anthropologists, and then also have some say or some effect on increasing diversity in anthropology as well. As a white male, it's I'd like to see other perspectives in the world. So
yeah, no, it was really clear to me back then, and I think it's clear to me now. Like looking at your articles, like I can see that you collaborate with students quite a bit, which I think is wonderful. So anyway, if anyone's looking for a forensic grad program, this is a pretty good advisor I know of. It's you, by the way. It's not that. What a terrible thing it would have been if I said someone else. But no, I think that's about it. So it's time for the end of the interview where I ask everyone the same 3 questions. And the first question is, if people wanted to learn more about forensic anthropology or like the kind of work you do, where is a good place for them to start?
As far as like books and stuff go?
Books, articles, TV series, whatever you want.
Okay. Well, so there runs the problem that I have such varied interests that, it's hard to say. So, but I would say, like Hegel and Sword's Advances in Forensic Taphonomy, David Carter, and out of Hawaii, he's got a paper called Cadaver Decomposition in Terrestrial Environment, which is a good one. Lee Lyman's Vertebrate Taphonomy, those are kind of things that I think are really good. And then, as far as the taphonomy goes, I also think that a lot of it is looking at some of the research that's done on kind of the body as an ecosystem. So, for example, let me see here. Let me see if I can find something. Oh, yeah, there's one called The Role of Carrion in Maintaining Biodiversity and Ecological Processes in Terrestrial Ecosystems. And those are the kind of papers that I think are, instrumental to understanding all these taphonomic processes. As far as the skeletal biology stuff, obviously things like John Curry's Bone Structure and Mechanics, David Burr's Basics of Applied Bone Biology, Bruce Martin's book on, what's it called, skeletal tissue mechanics. And then, of course, the other aspect that I have a lot is Chris Ruff's work on bone biomechanics. Kind of a basic one would be just his paper with Brigitte Holt and Eric Trinkhaus on, Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf, and so on bone functional adaptation. So those are the kind of things that I think, kind of where I go.
Yeah, those are great. I heard you reel off a few that I have in my collection as well. My unhinged book collection. The second question is, what are you reading for work right now?
Okay, let's see what I got on my desk. So right now, we're focused on understanding morphology of associated with obesity. And so a couple of them that I'm reading right now are the effects of obesity on knee and ankle biomechanics during walking, hip and knee and ankle joint forces in healthy weight, overweight, and obese individuals during walking, physical activity and obesity, biomechanics, and physiological key concepts. So there's a kind of, the biomechanics and trying to look at a lot of these are actually clinical stuff. So I'm looking at the clinical literature on it. So it's not really addressing specifically the questions that I'm after, but it's giving me the background to try to interpret some of the things that we are seeing in the bones.
And then the third question is, what are you consuming for fun right now? It can be books, TV, movies, hiking. People say all sorts of different things.
Well, so I have, as far as books go, in the process of reading The Immense World by, Ed Young.
Oh, yes.
So it is about how different animals sense the world, whether it's, through smell or differences in vision and all that kind of stuff. So to me, those are kind of fascinating things. For probably the last 10 years, I've been trying to read The Inner Fish, Your Inner Fish.
Neil Shubin's Your Inner Fish. Yeah. That's funny because I have both that Ed Young book and Neil Shubin's Your Inner Fish book in my to-read anthropology pile that I can see from here.
Okay. They're both good. And then I'm also a woodworker. So I used to, before I was an anthropologist, I was a cabinet maker. So I still dabble in woodworking, not as much as my wife wants me to, but I'm working towards that. And then I do a lot of, probably over the last 5 years, I've planted probably 100 trees and bushes. So just keeping them alive is part of what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. Puttering.
Yes.
I have a friend who name is Megan Humphreys, and she says that she's a psychologist. She says it's really important for us all to have an act of creation in our lives, like woodworking, or like for her, it's puttering in the garden.
Yeah.
And I think she said that to me a couple of weeks ago. And I think about it, I've thought about it at least once a day since she said it to me. It's just so true. Like it really does make you feel like more inside yourself and more human when you make things.
Right. And then, the puttering in the yard is actually a good thing too, because it's something that, that my wife and I are both involved in. And so hers is more the planning of where things are going to be done. And then my job is, actually planting them. But
that's lovely.
But we actually I've gotten to where we walk around and talk about, what would be good here, what would be good there. We're trying to get it to where we have basically no grass.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a wonderful day.
All right. You too. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Anthropology Podcast. If you have questions or comments, you can reach me at gabby.lapera@anthrobiology.com. That's spelled GABY.LAPERA@anthrobiology.com. This show is produced by me. Music courtesy of Chad Crouch, aka Poddington Bear at Sound of Picture.